And we are not going to let a bunch of crooks and robber barons take our beautiful Texas away from us. Hell no! Hell no! No, no, no!
RFID tracker chips embedded in state inspection stickers and toll tags are already being used to track the population. The new system is also meant to control growth and steer development through so-called smart growth.
Smart growth, which is nothing more than an effort to bring control into the cities. You have the Rewilding of America and the Wildlands Project, the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is to control our rural population.
Toll roads on interstate highways nationwide are walling off exit ramps to small towns and rural communities, and are creating ghost towns by design. This trend is accelerating under the NAFTA highway system and is meant to rewild more than half the country.
All of these things are designed to bring more and more control to bureaucracies rather than to the independent individual, the sovereign individual of this nation. What brought me into this whole discussion was the fact that while I was doing this multi-million-dollar research effort in the 1980s and early 1990s, I became aware of an agenda basically to lock up one half of the United States into wilderness corridors and reserves. What's called the Wildlands Project, but it was also a key cornerstone of the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity. It was during that study in which I began to realize that this was not an effort to protect the environment, but an effort to control you and I. They were dividing the United States up into little compartments in which they would rip out roads, which they would rip out whole communities and put them back in the wilderness.
The federal highway system was designed by Pentagon war planners in the 1950s to serve as a rapid deployment conduit to move ground forces for the defense of the United States during invasion. The unconstitutional Northern Command is now using the highway system as a force projection matrix to dominate populations across the United States. Through federally funded emergency command centers, county and city governments are being quietly federalized nationwide. Billions of dollars per city is being spent to install millions of surveillance cameras. Every town and hamlet, no matter how small or remote, is surveilled. License plate reading software tracks Americans' movements wherever they go. New systems are being deployed that scan your face, read your lips, and analyze your walk. Under the treasonous Military Commissions Act, American citizens can be secretly arrested, stripped of citizenship, flown to offshore torture camps, and secretly executed. Under Section 802 of the Patriot Act, all misdemeanors are considered terrorism. Federal police squads, called Viper teams, randomly force Americans to line up and show their papers. From the sidewalks of Miami to the subways of New York to the streets of Houston, Texas, citizens are being searched by heavily armed gangs of paramilitary police.
Come on, guys, come in. Yo, can you get that camera off of us, sir? Sir, can you get that camera?
United States, First Amendment.
All right, but you can get that camera. I'm saying get the camera out of my face. That's what I'm saying.
You're on the streets of New York.
So what does that mean? I'm saying get that camera out of my face. That's what I'm saying.
It's a free country.
Fuck wrong with
It's a free country.
Man? Get this damn camera out of my face.
Hey, this isn't Nazi Germany. There's no camera in your face.
God.
Hey, move to Russia, okay?
Yo, Sarge.
We can have cameras on the streets.
I said get it out of my face.
Your guy starts cussing at us out of the blue.
I said get it out of my face. That's what I'm saying.
It was never in your face.
Yo.
Long before 9/11, the Pentagon was aggressively violating the federal law that bars the military from policing the American people. Coast to coast, for more than 2 decades, teams of troops would just appear out of nowhere and randomly stop cars and search pedestrians. The acclamation accelerated with regular Army searching bags at the Super Bowl and the Kentucky Derby, as well as other high-profile events. Then President Bush signed a Defense Authorization Act, which radically increased the funding for the already bloated shadow government. In the act, the executive branch formally announced that it was preparing for domestic insurrection and went on to preemptively strip the state governors and legislatures of their powers. The federal government is openly announcing that it is the only authority as it treats the people and the states as enemies. Then on May 9th, 2007, President Bush unlawfully granted himself new powers, and the presidency officially became a fiat dictatorship. In the past, continuity of government has been shared by the legislative, judicial, and executive branches of government. Now, all power resides with the president for the smallest of reasons, including, in the document's own text, any incident in the world, regardless of location, that affects population, infrastructure, environment, economy, or government functions can trigger, at the president's will, total martial law. It is important to add that the president is merely a puppet of the global crime syndicate and may not use the new powers, but simply pass them on for use by future puppet administrations.
Приобретена эта победа. Не забывайте принесенных вами жертв.
You must teach people to love their leader. This is the only most important.
Why don't we learn from the mistakes of our ancestors? Why does humankind find itself bound in a cycle of bloodshed and enslavement? Predatory elites have always rationalized their oppression by claiming that they are superior and have the divine right to rule, when all they really are is a gaggle of ruthless psychopaths, parasitically feeding on the host population until their cancerous movement causes the collapse of the host. There have been thousands of tyrannical governments in history, and less than 10 that can truly be called free. In the 20th century alone, over 150 million people were murdered at the hands of the state. In Russia, the Red Terror consumed the lives of more than 60 million men, women, and children. Hitler's war killed 22 million. During Mao Zedong's reign alone, more than 60 million peasant farmers were killed. And the list goes on. 300,000 innocent civilians killed in Guatemala. More than 2 million souls brutally murdered by the government of Cambodia. 1,500,000 killed in Turkey. 300,000 in Uganda. 800,000 plus hacked to death with machetes in Rwanda. Sadly, there are too many examples of innocent families being exterminated by their governments on an industrial scale to name them all. It is a historical fact that the state is the #1 cause of unnatural death. If you take the 150 million people killed by power-mad government in the last century and divide it by 100,000, the number of souls lost would fill the biggest sports stadium, packed with 100,000 screaming fans, 1,500 times over. That's 1,500 sports stadiums, crammed with 100,000 people each, all exterminated. For those who think it can't happen here or won't happen to them, you have been warned. The carnage witnessed in the last 100 years was only the preparatory phase of the New World Order's master plan.
少有常识的人都会看出，如果我们的铁骑继续前进，这个螳臂挡车的歹徒难道能够阻挡得了吗？
Hitler and Stalin's crimes are now part of history. But the communist Chinese system of evil is not content with racking up the highest death toll in history. The mass murder and enslavement is still going on today and enjoys the full support and sanction of the New World Order.
摄像机拍下的这个画面，同西方某些国家的宣传恰恰相反，正好说明了我们的军队。
Communist China serves as a globalist laboratory, a proving ground where 1.4 billion people live out their lives as guinea pigs who serve as test subjects for the formulation of the brave new world. U.S. and British forces worked closely with Mao Zedong during World War II, and at the end of the war, they secretly backed Mao in driving out Chiang Kai-shek and the Nationalist. The OSS, and then the CIA, believed that Mao would have a stabilizing effect. Bill Clinton's mentor and Georgetown University political science professor Carol Quigley explained in his book, Tragedy and Hope, how the Anglo-American Roundtable groups backed every brand of authoritarianism, from communism to fascism, to ensure that a centralized government dominates the population and the economy as planned. The elite are monopoly men. They seek to create monopolies and dominate populations through the barrel of a gun. In their writings, the leadership of the New World Order has continuously heaped praise on the corrupt communist Chinese model. In August of 1973, in an article written by David Rockefeller for the New York Times, Rockefeller openly lauds and endorses Mao Zedong's actions, while celebrating their command and control system.
Whatever the price of the Chinese Revolution, it has obviously succeeded not only in producing more efficient and dedicated administration, but also in fostering high morale and community of purpose. The social experiment in China under Chairman Mao's leadership is one of the most important and successful in history. David Rockefeller, New York Times, August 10, 1973.
Communist China is the model, planned society for the New World Order. China has received more United Nations awards for its policies and form of governance than any other nation. In the eyes of globalist planners, authoritarian China is the future. China adopted the dreaded one-child policy due to lobbying from a consortium of eugenics organizations, which includes Planned Parenthood and the United Nations. Couples that have more than one child face heavy fines and imprisonment. The practice of forced abortion in China, coupled with the cultural desire to have a male child, has plunged China into a deepening crisis where there are 30 million more men than women. The Chinese police state ruthlessly crushes all forms of dissent. Underground churches, Falun Gong practitioners, striking factory workers are all sent to forced labor camps. Their blood and tissue types are cataloged in preparation for organ harvesting. The Chinese government then sells the prisoners' organs to the highest bidder on the world market. If a wealthy patient chooses to fly into China, the prisoner is killed and the organs are implanted. If the organs are being flown out of the country, a mobile execution van extracts the organs on the way to the waiting aircraft. The social engineers of China aggressively euthanize the elderly and disabled. China is merely following the globalist blueprint for the world. The same system of total dehumanization is quietly being phased in worldwide.
Depopulation should be the highest priority of foreign policy towards the Third World. Henry Kissinger, 1974.
There's a need for a new world order. but it has different characteristics in different parts of the world. Now, none of this may succeed this time, but this to me is sort of the outline by which someday in the next few years